Welcome back, everyone, to our 50-second deep dive. Wow, 52. It really feels like we've covered some ground, climbed a fair bit of that mountain together, you know?
It certainly does. It's been quite the ascent, looking at these ideas from, well, all sorts of angles.
And today we find ourselves right at a really interesting point. We're focusing on the 18th canto of Dante's Purgatory. It's smack bang in the middle of the whole thing.
Right in the center. And that's no accident. Its position really signals its importance. It offers some pretty profound lessons about life's journey, lessons that apply to all of us.
So we'll be looking closely at the canto itself, and maybe just quickly touch on where we left Dante right before this, just for context.
Good idea. He'd just come out of that thick smoke representing wrath, didn't he? And he's starting to get this clearer picture.
Yeah, and the big takeaway seems to be that every sin, fundamentally, is just love pointed in the wrong direction, like our natural desires getting off track.
Precisely. That concept, love, as the engine behind everything we do, good or bad, it's the absolute core of Dante's system here. It's the fulcrum for justice, for redemption, for the whole process.
Okay, so let's try and unpack that a bit. Virgil lays out this theory of love. It's the source of all our actions. But it's not just raw feeling, is it? There's more to it.
No, not at all. Reason plays a massive role. Virgil explains that, yes, our soul is naturally drawn toward things that seem good or pleasurable. That's the initial spark of love. But critically, we aren't just, puppets of those feelings. Our intellect, our reason, acts like a gatekeeper or maybe a guide.
A guide. How so?
Well, it has the power to examine those impulses, to say, yes, this is good, or no, hold on, this isn't right. That capacity to approve or reject, that's our free will in action.
Right. So there's the initial pull, the desire, but then there's this crucial step where our thinking mind gets involved. That feels very relevant to just everyday life, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Think about it in your own experience.
Yeah.
You feel that flash of anger, maybe?
Yeah.
There's the initial impulse.
Sure.
But then your reason kicks in. It assesses the situation, considers the consequences, maybe guides you toward a calmer response. Or perhaps you really want that instant gratification, but your rational side reminds you of a longer-term goal.
So that constant negotiation between impulse and reason, that's us exercising free will.
That's exactly what Dante, through Virgil, is highlighting. It's central to our moral journey, to becoming better versions of ourselves.
Okay. Now, moving into the canto specifically, Dante meets the souls who were slothful, and their punishment is, well, it's kind of surprising. They're running around like mad.
It does seem paradoxical, doesn't it? Slothful souls being hyperactive. But the idea is that this frantic running is actually making amends for their past spiritual laziness.
Making amends how?
By forcing them into action now. They lacked zeal, lacked spiritual energy in life. So in purgatory, they have to constantly push themselves, almost like they're trying to catch up on all the spiritual effort they failed to exert before.
That makes sense. And it's such a stark contrast, isn't it, to the wrathful back in the Inferno. They were stuck, bogged down in mud.
Exactly. One is an excess of passion, boiling over into anger. The other is a defect, a lack of sufficient passion or drive towards the good.
So what does that tell us? About balance, maybe?
I think that's key. It really underscores the need for balance. Too much uncontrolled passion is destructive, but too little motivation, too little engagement with what matters.
Yeah.
That's also a serious feeling. The ideal is that right measure of love, finding the proper intensity and direction.
The canto then gives us examples to illustrate this. First, examples of zeal, that positive energy, like Mary hurrying to visit Elizabeth.
Yes, straight after the Annunciation, it shows promptness, eagerness, and acting on something spiritually significant. No hesitation, just purposeful action.
And it's not just religious examples, is it? There's Julius Caesar, too.
Right. His rapid campaign in Spain during the Civil War, a totally different sphere, political, military, but the same quality is highlighted. Swiftness, decisiveness when pursuing a goal.
So the lesson is broader. Zeal applies to, well, any important undertaking.
I think so. It suggests that when you have a clear, worthwhile objective, whether it's spiritual growth or a major project in the world, acting with energy and promptness is virtuous. It makes you think, doesn't it? About times in your own life where you really acted with that kind of zeal. What happened?
It definitely does. Usually good things happen when you have that focus. But then on the flip side, we get examples of punished sloth. The Hebrews in the desert.
Wandering for 40 years. A classic example of failing to persevere due to a lack of faith, a kind of collective spiritual weariness. They lost sight of the goal, the promised land.
Such a powerful image of aimlessness born from, well, giving up internally.
And then there's the classical example Aeneas's companions, some of them just decided to stay behind in Sicily. They abandoned the mission, the founding of Rome.
Why? Just too tired, too difficult.
Seems so. They lost the will to continue the hard journey. It represents choosing comfort, or maybe just losing faith in the larger purpose over completing a truly significant task.
And that hits home too, you know? How many times have we maybe started something meaningful but then let it drift because it got tough or we just lost that initial spark?
It's a very relatable human failing. That temptation to settle, to avoid the struggle. These examples are warnings, really, against letting that inertia take over. Maybe you can recall a time something like that happened. What can we learn from looking back at those moments?
Definitely food for thought. It all seems to circle back to finding that balance, doesn't it? You need the initial love, the desire, the passion.
Absolutely, that's the engine.
But then you need reason to steer it correctly, and you need that staying power, that perseverance to actually see it through.
And Virgil keeps bringing it back to free will. We are the ones making these choices, moment by moment. That gives us the responsibility, you see.
So the big takeaway here isn't just about feeling the right things, but about acting on them with energy, putting zeal into practice, and sticking with it, overcoming that spiritual sluggishness.
Precisely. That commitment, that follow-through is crucial. And, it's really telling that this whole discussion happens right here, Canto 18, the very center of the entire Divine Comedy.
You mentioned its position earlier. It feels deliberate.
Oh, extremely deliberate. It pairs with the previous canto, which also discussed love. Together, they form the conceptual heart, the moral core of the whole poem. This theory of love and free will is central to everything Dante is building.
And it's fascinating how he pulls from both traditions, Christian stories like Mary, classical ones like Caesar and Aeneas.
It reinforces the universality, doesn't it? These principles about how we direct our energy, how we balance passion and reason, how we persevere, they transcend specific cultures or times. They're just fundamental human challenges.
Okay, so summing up this deep dive into Canto 18, love is the driving force, but reason must guide it. Zeal and promptness are vital for acting on what's good. Sloth, that spiritual inertia, is a real danger that can make us abandon important journeys. And it all comes down to balance and taking responsibility for our choices through free will.
Well put. It's a dense canto, but those are definitely the crucial threads. Our choices, guided by reason and fueled by rightly ordered love, really do determine the path we carve through life.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to take away. Consider a journey you're on right now. It could be a work project, a personal goal, maybe something about your own growth. Where could you perhaps inject a bit more zeal? Where might you be feeling that pull of inertia, that temptation to ease up? And how can you best balance your own passion with reason, drawing maybe a little inspiration from Dante's runners in Purgatory?
A great question to ponder.
Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our 50-second deep dive. Thanks so much for joining us again on this exploration.
Yes, thank you. We look forward to exploring more insights with you next time.